You know, most of the time when someone comes after being introduced as having a great resume, that really means they're really old. They've done a lot of things because they've survived a while, and that's probably the case with me. One of the places that I love to come, my wife just sees me getting excited several days before I make the visit, is to the Baptist University of the Americas campus. I have many dear friends here, and thank you, Dr. Montero, for what a great introduction. And I have friends in your administration, and then friends among the student body that are in both of our programs at this point, and among the faculty, and so many others. And I'm just grateful to be here with you today. I want you to turn with me, if you can, in your Bibles, to the 11th chapter of Matthew's Gospel. As you turn there, I wish I could speak to you in Spanish as these others have, but that is not one of my gifts. In fact, I think it was Dr. Moises Rodriguez introduced me one time, and he said to a group in Spanish that he could say anything he wanted about me because I wouldn't understand. It wasn't it, Brother Teo? That's what he said. So today I'm going to speak to you in English, but I'm going to try to speak clearly so that even if the English language is not your primary language, you'll be able to understand me. As you look into the 11th chapter of Matthew, I want to take you back to, Dr. Montero mentioned to you that that a portion of my life was spent in Nashville, Tennessee, where I was in my doctoral studies. I also served a Baptist university there for about 10 years. My children began kindergarten and then went all the way to high school while we lived there. And so Nashville in many ways is our home. And when you think of Nashville, I don't know if you think like many Texans do, but many Texans, if you mention Nashville, Tennessee, they think of one thing, the Grand Ole Opry. That's a musical, country music phenomenon that takes place every Friday and Saturday in a special auditorium where country and western stars come and sing. Did you watch the Grammys last night? There were some stars on there like Taylor Swift that sings country music and popular music. And I love music. I loved what we sang this morning with the harmonies that I heard. I think the greatest harmonic instrument that has ever been created is the human vocal cord. Because we can do harmony in ways that instrumentation can only imagine. Well, I think it's wonderful to listen to music, and I love the harmonies that I hear, but you can make a mistake sometimes. You can actually listen to the words that the songwriters write. Have you ever done that? One night, we were taking some guests of ours to the Grand Ole Opry when we lived in Nashville, and I decided I would listen to some of those country and western songs and listen to the words. Oh, was that ever a mistake? We got there, and a country and western star that was pretty famous in Nashville came out and began to sing. And do you know what his song was about? It was called It's Crying Time Again. And he began to just number off verse by verse all the reasons that he had to cry. And I think there were 32 verses in that song. I mean, he had lots of reasons to be sad. And as he finished his song, I wanted to make sure I had my handkerchief in my pocket because I might start crying anytime, you know. Well, a little while later, just before intermission, another person came out and he began to sing. He was a new star. And as he sang, he sang these words in the refrain of his song. He sang, "If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all." I listened to that and I compared it to the crying time again, and I thought, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't be listening to these words. I'll be depressed when it's over with. Well, we got toward the end of the Opry that evening, and a woman came out on the stage that has, if I called her name, you'd know her, and she began to sing her country and western song, and the song went like this. I've got heartaches by the number. And she began to number them off verse by verse by verse. And it was as if she had one of these big legal pads, you know, that are yellow with the little fine lines on them. And she had just gone down one side of a page and then the back side, numbering her heartaches. Well, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever felt like the songwriters feel? that it's crying time again? That you've got heartaches by the number, that if it weren't for bad luck, you wouldn't have any luck at all? Have you ever felt like that? Don't despair, because every human being feels like that. And most students feel like that just before the semester is over with, and all your papers are due, and those tests are staring you in the face. We all feel like that, don't we? Well, you're not alone, because back in the time of Jesus, he was looking out on a crowd one day. And as he looked at them, he saw their hurt and their pain and their anxiety. And he had a special word for that crowd. And because they look so much like us, that word applies to you and me as well. I want you to look at the very end of chapter 11 in Matthew, verses 28, 29, and 30. Because for you, if it's crying time again, if your luck is all bad, and if you can number heartaches into infinity, then you need these words from Jesus Christ himself. Listen to what Jesus said to that crowd and to us today. I'm reading from the English Standard Version, but it'll sound very much like yours. Jesus is speaking to the crowd, and he says, "Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest, a rest even unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Oh, so much better word than the songwriter's words, isn't it? Here's a word for us today in the 2010s, a word built for you and me. I want you to look at what Jesus said, and I want you to see how he said it. In these 3 verses, he gave us 3 imperative commands. We don't see those imperatives quite as plainly in English as they were in the Aramaic and the Greek, but they're very, very strong commands. And then he follows the commands by 3 promises. And I want you to see those for all of us who sometimes feel like the songwriters feel. Will you do that with me? Look at his first command. It's the first words of verse 28. Jesus looked at that crowd of people who were hurting and who were anxious and worrying, and he said, "Come to me. Come to me." And then he specified exactly who he was talking to. He said, "Come to me, all you who labor." All you who labor. Now, in the book of Genesis, the scriptures teach us that God gave humanity work to do when he created us and placed us here. And that work has meaning and gives form to our days and makes us better and bigger and stronger and happier. Work is a good thing. But, you know, even if you talk to your professors, they will admit to you, I think, that sometimes work just turns into routine, a little bit boring. Sometimes it just turns into labor. My daughter had a little pet that she kept in her room when she was a child. It was a gerbil. Do y'all know what a gerbil is? To me, it was a rat, little rat, you know. And she kept this little gerbil in a kind of an aquarium-like glass container up on her desk, and she had a little wheel in there. And I would watch that gerbil jump onto that wheel and begin to run. And I'd leave the room and come back 30 minutes later, and that gerbil would still be running. And then I would notice that after all of that running, that gerbil got off that wheel right where he got on. Every time. He ran and ran and ran and got nowhere. He just expended energy and must have been frustrated when his run was over with. Those of you who are going out at 6 in a few days to run, don't just stand still and run in place. Go see something. Run around the block. Let a dog chase you. Do something, you know, to make sure that you're not bored in that enterprise. Sometimes we labor and we get nowhere. The day is over with. We're exhausted. We have perspiration on our clothes and on ourselves, and we realize we're tired, but we look back on the day and we haven't done anything. And Jesus said, if you're like that, if you're spending a lot of energy and getting nowhere, then you come to me. But he didn't stop there. Look on in verse 28. He said, "Come to me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden. Sometimes my wife asks me to go shopping with her. I love my wife with all my heart. I think she's a great lady, and I'd do anything, but she always asks on Saturday during football season. When my favorite college team is playing on the television, and it's third quarter, and they're behind by 3 points. And she'll say these words. She'll say, David, let's go shopping. I know what that means. She wants me to go to the grocery store with her. And when we go to the grocery store, it's that huge grocery store with the 14-acre parking lot out front, you know. And the grocery store is at the bottom of a steep hillside of parking. And we walk inside, and usually it's a shimmering heat wave day, you know, when we go in. She says, I'll get a shopping cart, and why don't you get one too, just in case we need it? And we start down the shelves, and I don't know how it happens, but things just fall off into that shopping cart. By the time we get to the checkout, both of them look like semi-truck trailers loaded up to the top. And we sit there as the the cashier begins to punch in all these and run the little things through. And when it's over with, I know what you're thinking. I'm going to be shocked by the bill. Well, that's sometimes a shock, but that's not what I'm thinking. What really makes me dreading that trip is this. The question innocently asked by the bagger is, well, first there are two questions. The first one is, now this doesn't sound bad, does it? But it makes me shake in my shoes. She says to my wife, never to me, paper or plastic? Sounds kind of innocent, doesn't it? But here's what I learned. If I have those paper bags, I can only hold 3 of them, you know, one in each arm and one kind of squeezed between. But those plastic bags, they have steel reinforcement, I'm sure, in the handles, because you can just line those up your arms on either side. And I mean, you can carry a ton of those. The second question that the bagger always asks to my wife is this: do I need help to come out and help you load your groceries? And she says, no, I brought my husband along. So what that means is we don't even need the cart. She helps me load all those baskets up both arms. And then she takes the last one herself. And we start to the parking lot, and we're parked through the shimmering heat waves up at the very top of the parking lot. And so before I start, I stand there for a minute on the pavement, but I'm afraid to stand very long because I might just, with all that weight, sink right through the asphalt. Have you ever felt like that? Have you ever felt heavy laden like that? Jesus said, if you feel like that, then come to me. Isn't that interesting? If you're running and getting nowhere, or if you stop and the burden of your life is just pulling you into oblivion, then Jesus' command is you come on, come to me. Now look at his promise at the end of verse 28. He says, if you come to me, I will give you rest. Oh, I had fun looking at that word rest and finding out what it meant. Now, if you don't want to find out there's no Santa Claus, don't go look at what that word rest really means. Because I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that means a beautiful spring day like today with no mosquitoes and a light breeze blowing in the backyard and a hammock between 2 shade trees, a glass of lemonade and your favorite music and book where you can just while away the rest of the afternoon. Forget it. Rest is an active word. Rest is a word that means something entirely different from your understanding and mine. In English, rest just means kicking back and putting your feet up in the lazy boy and watching your favorite show or a movie on TV. But that's not what it means in the Bible. Let me tell you what this word means. This word means that you can run as hard as you were running when you got nowhere. And you can carry the load that you were carrying when you were sinking into despair. And it'll seem light, and you will have purpose. And when the day is over with, you may be physically tired, but your spirit is saying, I can't wait for tomorrow to see what Jesus is going to do through me again tomorrow. What rest is purpose. It's meaning. It's fulfillment. What Jesus promises all of us who are running and getting nowhere is that our days and our steps and our efforts will have meaning. You're not just writing a research paper. You're getting a degree so that God can use you in his kingdom. You're not just learning how to speak. You're learning how to share with others a communication of eternal significance that can change the world and build the kingdom of Christ. You're learning things that are empowering you to become everything God created you to be. If you're running and getting nowhere, Jesus says, I will give you purpose. If you're dying under the loads of the day, Jesus will say, I'll hold those for you. You just grow so that you can hold them yourselves. Jesus' first promise was to give us that kind of rejuvenation, that kind of rest, if we'll just come to Him. Aren't you eager to see what the second promise is? Let's look back in the Bible. Look at verse 29. Jesus says, and this is a command. In English, it sounds kind of passive, but it's a command. Jesus says, take. Doesn't he? In verse 29, he says, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Let me tell you about the yoke. It's not the little yellow part of the egg, you know, when you're frying in the morning. This is a different kind of yoke. In Israel's day, when a field needed to be plowed, then a piece of equipment made out of wood and leather was placed around an animal. And that animal was then hitched through that yoke by other pieces of equipment to a plow. And that yoke allowed the animal to pull the weight of the plow to cultivate a field. But in Israel, the fields were always too rocky and hard for one animal to pull by himself. And so two animals were always needed. And so what happened was a second animal would be harnessed in that yoke with the first, and both of them would pull the plow, always. Israel was a double yoke society, all right? There were always two animals hooked up to those plows. Now in English, we kind of think of this and we say, oh, okay, what Jesus was saying was, I'm going to go warm up the yoke and I'm going to pull the plow down the road 2 or 3 times, and then I'm going to take it off and I'm going to hand it to you and watch you work. That's not the meaning at all. Jesus is saying, I'm going to do the pulling. You do the growing. All I'm asking you to do is put your neck through the yoke and watch me work. And then in verse 30, he tells us this. He says, my burden is easy and my yoke is light. He says, and there's one promise for both of these commands. So I'm going to give you one, and then I'm going to give you the next command, and then we're going to go back and look at the promise. Jesus said to these people that were listening to him that felt like the songwriters feel, like you and I feel, he's saying to them, come to me and then yoke up with me and watch me work while you grow. But then he said something else in verse 29. Look at that, the other command. He said, learn of me. Learn of me. Now, do y'all ever, when I was a child, we had lots of news magazines. And I know magazines are not a big deal today because you can just pull out your smartphone and read anything you want to. But have you ever seen a magazine with a person's picture on the front of it? Like a presidential candidate or a musician or something like that? If somebody says, hey, do you know Lady Gaga? You could say, oh, I know her because I've seen her picture. I know who she is. But if someone said to you, are you friends with Lady Gaga? Would you answer the same way? When Jesus says, learn of me, he's not saying, I want you to casually know me. I want you to know what others say about me. He's saying, I want you to intimately share life with me. I want you to have a relationship with me. I want us to be friends. Now, the only way you can have that kind of relationship is to spend time together. Can I tell you a real quick story? I promise we'll be out of here by noon. Let me just tell you this real quick story. My dad was a rancher in West Texas, and we had some land that was kind of broken where our cattle used to range. That means there were a lot of canyons and hills and deep crevices in it. And so the only way that we could really work our cattle and keep up with them was on horseback. So we always kept horses around our place. When we were about 11, 12, 13 years of age, our dad would think that we knew enough by then to go buy ourselves a horse that we could use on his property to help manage his cattle for the rest of our childhoods. My time came when I was 11 years old. My dad took me to the sale barn in my hometown where a remuda of horses from Wyoming had just come in. We walked around to the corrals behind the barn before the sale began, and we began to look at these horses. And he had given me $90 to buy a horse, which was enough in those days to buy a pretty good workhorse for a ranch. My dad said to me, "Now, son, see that Palomino over there?" And I looked over in the corner, and there was a Palomino filly standing by herself, and her nose was bleeding from a tear on her nose. And every time another horse would come into that part of the corral, she would kick and whinny and try to bite him and run him off. So she was over there kind of by herself. So my dad said, "Now stay away from that horse. Don't bid on her. Because if you'll look, she's only about 2 years old. Look at her teeth. And look back on her backsides, and you'll see that she has 3 brands on her." That meant that 3 different ranchers in Wyoming have tried to break her, and none of them could. So they're sending her down here to Texas, where her reputation can't precede her, to see if they can pawn her off on some other people. Well, I watched the other horses my dad told me about, but my eyes kept going back to that Palomino. She had these great gaits, and I could just envision myself riding that Palomino. Well, to make a long story a little longer, the bidding began, and I began to bid on that Palomino filly. And pretty soon, I found myself owning the Palomino filly. It took the wranglers, both of my brothers, my dad, and me to load that filly into the stock trailer to get her home. We got her to a corral. My dad did not say one word to me on the 30-mile trip back to our house. We unloaded the filly into the corral, and my dad turned to me, and he said, "Son, it's May. By the time school starts in August, you'd better have that filly broken for work on this ranch." I swallowed hard, and in my voice that was changing, I said, "Yes, sir," and went on about my business. The next day, or the next week or so, I came out with a little piece of apple in my hand, and I'd hold it out to the Palomino filly, and she'd run across the other side of the corral and wouldn't even come close. So I'd take the apple and I'd put it in her feed trough, and when I came back the next day, it was gone. I did that for about a week, and then finally I put the apple in my hand, and she would turn, and she'd start coming over toward me, and she'd stretch her neck as only a horse can stretch it. And then she'd put her lips out as far as they could, and she'd grab that apple and run across to the other side of the pen and eat it. That kept up for about 10 days. In about 3 weeks, I could hold the apple close to me, and that Palomino filly would come trotting up, get it out of my hand, and run away. As the summer went on, I took an old saddle and I tossed up on top of her that she almost destroyed by bucking it off. But after a month or so of that, I was able to tighten down the cinch. And one day, in about the second week of August, I turned to my dad and I said, "Dad, I'm going to ride the filly today. I would like you to come to the pen with me to take me to the hospital when I'm finished." So Dad said, "Okay," and we walked over to the corral, and I tied her to a hitching post, and I put her saddle on her, and I put a bridle on her mouth, and I put the reins over the backside of her, and I closed my eyes, and I put my left foot in the stirrup, and I tossed my right foot over into the other stirrup, and I said, "Okay, Dad, turn her loose." And I waited, and as the yellow jackets began to buzz around my head, and the insects I could hear them, I thought, with my eyes closed, dying's not as painful as I thought it would be. And so I decided I'd just open one eye just a little bit to see what heaven looked like. And I opened my eye, and that mean Palomino filly was craning her neck around to my pocket where I had a little piece of an apple that I was going to feed her after she broke all my bones. She never bucked one time. And I rode her on my father's property until I went away to college. And then I could whistle when I came home, and she'd come running from the backside of the home pasture. And when my children were little, they would ride her as well. You know what happened? A boy and a wild horse spent a summer together, learning of each other. And a great friendship was formed. Jesus says to you, learn about me. Stay so close to me that you know where the apples are. Stay so close to me that you're not afraid when I put a saddle on you. Stay so close to me that you know I'm going to care for you, and you know how I'm going to respond. Now look at the promise. Take my yoke on you and learn of me, and you will find rest, soul rest. It doesn't have to be given to you anymore. as it was in verse 28, you'll be able to find it because it's a gift from the Father. So what is my word for you on this beautiful day in San Antonio, Texas? It's this. It's okay to feel like the songwriters feel, because those songwriters are so popular simply because they express the way all of us feel. But we have a master who wants us to come to him, who wants us to yoke up with him in partnership and to learn of him in friendship, so that our lives will be filled on a plateau so high the songwriters can never express it in the words that they have to offer. That's what we can be. And that's the message that all those people driving by Interstate 35 out there need to hear. And that's the message that you can convey to your friends and family, and that you can live by for a lifetime. May God bless Baptist University of the Americas and all of its students. And may God bless the ministry that he puts on your heart and your soul as you come to him, take his yoke, and learn of him. Thank you. Thank you.